In this video, we will start to introduce some complexity in the equation leading to low intrusiveness sounds, taking in consideration amplitude and temporal dimensions. Amplitude usually is the first factor taken in consideration when trying to correct an intrusive sound. This sound is too loud, take down the volume. But just measuring the amplitude of a signal can be extremely complex. Several methods have been adopted, pre-filtering in several ways the signal to be measured in order to simulate the response of the ear, and even taking into account several ways to average the amount of sonic energy delivered by a particular situation. For years, in the field of urban soundscape studies, researchers concentrated on studying matters of sound pressure. While this dimension is still extremely important, from the 80s, researchers started to understand how several timbral features were critical. Sounds could be very intrusive even at lower amplitude. Another important element to be considered is time. Several studies have explored how temporal dimension contribute to the intrusiveness of sounds. The most widely accepted finding is that duration is positively correlated with intrusiveness. This is why a short shot of klaxon can be perceived as less aggressive than a prolonged and sustained one. An important dimension is the morphology of attack and decay. A sound can induce less urgency if it ends with a slow fade, maybe in conjunction with a transformation in timbre. And the attack of a sound is less intrusive if it grows in intensity in a very gradual and slow way. This slow shape has to be really slow. A sound with a fade-in up to 2000 milliseconds is not yet out of the territory of intrusiveness. It can still evoke stirring and arousing primitive emotional states. In my personal practice, I saw that in order to avoid any sensation of aggression and intrusion, a sound with a significant timbral difference from the background should take at least 6 seconds to emerge and to fade out. The following image resumes a detail of an analysis of temporal dimension I conducted during my participation to the S+T+ARTS project. With Professor Antonio Camurri, I investigated several temporal dimensions which structure human experience. The timescales we identified are reactive, 0.1 second, 1 second. This layer contains events which fluctuate between appearing fused together and as separated. They start to evoke a sensation of pulsation and a clear sense of urgency. Events in this layer oscillate between being too fast to be used as a synchronization mark for clapping and allowing a comfortable clapping rate. Now, 0.5 seconds, 2 seconds. The lower part of this layer contains events which progressively diminish the evocation of a sensation of urgency and enter the zone of preferred BPM, rate of healthy walking, and easiness of clapping synchronization. The upper part of this layer contains pulsations which make synchronized clapping difficult and correspond to the slower rates of traditional metronomes. Present. 1 second, 8 seconds. This layer represents what French psychologist Paukl Fraisse called the perceptual present, a temporal dimension where events can be grasped as coherent and homogeneous, and where it is easier to encode, memorize, and recognize musical patterns. According to Fraisse, the core of this layer is around 2-3 seconds. Context, 5 seconds, 12 seconds, and more. This layer represents the exit from the perceptual present and characterizes events whose length exceeds what can no more be consciously perceived as one coherent event. In this layer, a saliency phenomena starts to appear. Low intrusiveness events are at the border between the last two scales, present context, while the first two scales identify events which tend to create an urgent and immediate response dimension. In the Danzarte project, which focused on low intrusiveness sounds to nudge players to move slowly and with fluidity, we excluded audio events in the first two timescales and allowed only events temporally organized at the border of present and context dimensions.